Okay. Good morning. We'd like to get this started right away. It's just a quick presentation. I think it'll provide you some facts about what we're doing and trying to accomplish, and give you some things to think about as you prayerfully consider any pledges that you might be willing to give to Abiding Grace. So with that, I will open it up to Don. Are you taking it over?
The theme of this campaign and the scripture verse for this, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And part of the freedom that we have as Christians is because of this amazing grace that God has given to us. And the theme, Mission Freedom, is really about the freedom that this congregation can experience from the indebtedness, from the debt load that it's carrying right now, so that other ministries can happen. And that's what Tim is going to cover here in these next few slides about why this is so important and how this is going to happen. So Bruce, if you want to advance that. This is what we're doing. We went through the scripture stroll during the worship this morning, and now we're going to hear a little bit about the history and how we got to where we are. So Tim, go ahead.
Thank you.
Next slide.
What we like to talk about real quickly is the history. A lot of you have been here since the beginning, some haven't been, but I think it relates to what we're trying to accomplish at this point in time. Back in 2000 and, we'll get through once we get to where we need to be. All right, so for those of you who were around in 2010 is when we had our first service. It was at Parr Park. We had this young guy that the bishop gave to us to do a service for us. There's about 45 people or 50 people there. Pastor Nick was brand new out of seminary. He was nervous because the police kept patrolling through the park, and he kept pouring the communion wine and was afraid he was going to be arrested. And we had our first service, and at the end of that first service, we passed a basket to collect enough money so that we could pay Pastor Nick. We had no money. It had been a bunch of people that had been sitting in a living room, and this is our first service that kind of generated out of that. And from that, we began to look for a place, and we came here. And we rented this gym while it was still a school. And then in 2011, we organized as a worship community and became Abiding Grace Lutheran Church. And at that time, we knew we liked this property. And so in 2012, we had our first capital campaign, and the capital campaign allowed us to negotiate with the owners of the school, and we were able to purchase this property. So through the generosity of our congregation, again, we were able to take the next step. So now we've passed the basket, we paid Nick for his service. Now we've passed the basket, and we've raised enough money that we can buy the property. The bishop and his counterparts did not think we could do it. In fact, they told us, "You're silly to even try." But this congregation was so focused and so dedicated and so generous that we all worked together. And even when MIF wrote me a letter and said, "We won't give you the loan," we wrote a letter back to them and said, "If you won't give us the money, we'll find somebody that will." And they relented, and they gave us the money, and they weren't sure we were going to make it. And out of that came the purchase of the property. The renovation then started to take place here on campus, and we grew, and we grew, and we grew some more. And then in 2015, we had a second capital campaign. We were concerned that we weren't going to have any place to park cars. Highland Avenue was supposed to become a 4-lane road. We were parking illegally across the street. We were just going to do it, and hopefully that we could beg forgiveness at the end. Unfortunately, nobody ever gave us any word, but we knew we needed parking areas. So we raised another capital campaign, and out of that we raised enough money that we also wanted to make our church home look more churchy. And so renovations were made in here. The whole front area, the whole front stage was torn out. A new one was put in. Paint went up. We redid the classroom facilities and painted those. And then we built the parking lot. And we found in building the parking lot is we had a lot of money for laying concrete. It was all the money that it took for the infrastructure and the new sewers and the retention basin and taking out the trees and negotiating with the city. And if you took this tree out, then you had to put 4 plants in here. And for over a year, we negotiated with the city and finally came up, and the money came in, and we built our parking lot. And that allowed us to continue to grow. We're now in the 3rd phase, and we're good stewards, and we want to do the right thing. And so one of the things that we are attempting to do now is that in 3 years, we have a balloon payment coming off on our original mortgage. And then we'll have to refinance. Currently, we cannot pay our service load with our weekly revenue that comes in. So we have to go to capital campaigns. We want to pay what we owe down. We owe $1.2 million. We want to pay it down with as much money as we can raise so that when we refinance, that we will have the money to be able to pay for it on a reasonable basis out of our every weekly collections. And then it will also allow us other things that hopefully we'll be able to expand. Maybe we can start looking at the rest of our plan that we built for the narthex and the kitchen and classrooms, and somewhere down the road maybe even the sanctuary would come about. But to do that, we have to be able to finance and work with the mortgage that we have and that allows us to function appropriately. One of the things on this campaign that's probably a little different than the others, there's only one purpose for this money, and that is to pay down our debt. Not very exciting. I wish I could say, oh yeah, well you give us this money and we'll just build, the Taj Mahal in the back end. It's not that way. We need to be good stewards. We need to pay down the debt. We need to get to a position that we can then expand our mission. We can look at our master plan and see what we can do with that. But the importance of this campaign and your generosity to help us make sure that we get down to the very, very lowest amount we can to refinance. And then we can control it. Right now we're paying almost $9,000 a month in a mortgage payment. And that's not doable out of our just regular giving. So we want to get that taken down. So with that said, that's the reason why we're going to our 3rd capital campaign. And we are looking at a way to continue the focus and continue the generosity that you all have been so good with over these years. And we hope that you will take a look at this, and if you have questions, just feel free to ask any and all of us on that part of it. Nick?
This.
Okay.
So you may have heard that I've been elected to the board of directors for the ALCA, the ALCA Church Council. And I was there for my first council meeting this week. I was there Thursday and Friday. Came back early for a wedding yesterday. But I heard some interesting things while I was there. Our church is doing some real interesting things that I'm proud of, but there's some stats that I heard that are certainly concerning. 25% of ELCA congregations did not have a baptism last year. 51% of ELCA congregations did not welcome a new member through affirmation of baptism last year. That's half of our congregations. What we are doing here is unique. It's rare. It's a wonderful story, but this is not the end of the story. We have a long way to go. I was talking to another pastor, and he said that I was talking about our capital campaign. He was talking about starting a capital campaign at his congregation in Iowa. And another pastor said, well, how long have you been there? And he said, a little over 8 years. He said, oh, you've been there long enough now to do a capital campaign. It made me laugh because one of my friends was like, how long have you been at Abiding Grace, Nick? I said, oh, a little over 9 years. And how many capital campaigns have you done? I said, oh, we're in the middle of our third. And it occurred to me, most Lutheran congregations have capital campaigns every 30 to 40 years. Is that right, Kathy? The congregation that I grew up in has had three capital campaigns in the last 100 years. They had one in the 1930s, they had one in the 1960s, and they had one in 1996. For you to walk in here whenever you did and to say, yes, this is the church I want to belong to, knowing that we were going to be in transition for years, knowing that we were going to be in a sanctuary-nasium for years, knowing that we were going to be doing capital campaigns. How many of you, this is your third capital campaign with us? How many of you, this is your second? For those of you who have been here and been a part of all these campaigns, to stick around, and for those of you who are here for the first time and saying, you know what, yeah, I'm here to listen. I'm here to meet the needs of the church. You are unique. The reason our church is unique is because you're unique, is because you're willing to do the difficult things, because you want to see our church thrive. You are rock stars. When you go anywhere else around the country and you stop in at an ELCA congregation, tell them our story, because people need to be inspired by what the Spirit is doing here. This is a great story, but it's just beginning still. Congregations last a long time. Abiding Grace is going to be here a long time. And it's because of you. It's because of you who were here at the beginning. It's because of you who are here now. So with that being said, I'd like to invite Pastor Don forward, and he's going to share a little bit about creative ways that we can think about giving.
One of the great things that we have an opportunity to do in a capital campaign is to think through and to prepare through prayer, through gathering more information, through having conversations with each other, and really grasping how important this can be for the future of the church. So Bruce, if you'll advance. So back to the vision for this. This is what Pastor Nick has been talking about. The vision is to be free from the debt, or at least reduce it so significantly that it's manageable, free to grow in God's abiding grace, free for future ministry, things that can happen that you may not even have dreamt about yet, and that's part of the joy. So free to serve, free to grow, and free to give. Next slide. So one more time. Creative giving. So what does it mean, and why is it important to have creativity in our thinking through what gift we might be able to give to this campaign? Next slide. A couple of things, a couple of reasons. One is that it might increase the gift that you're able to give to this congregation and through your support. And there are occasions when it also can be advantageous to you in terms of whether it be a tax advantage or whatever it might be. So those are a couple of things that we're going to talk about as a premise for this. If you go to the next slide, please. There's a couple of ways of giving creatively. One is simply an outright gift, and the other is a deferred gift, and we're going to talk about those a little bit. Obviously, Sunday morning offerings are outright gifts. They're gifts given either through a direct transfer from your bank account, using an app, writing a check, giving cash, whatever it might be. Those are, you have the resources, you give that. And the sources of outright gifts. One is simply prioritized budgeting. I mean, I know a number of people when there's a capital campaign in their congregation who may have been considering purchasing a new car in a year or two or whatever. What they've decided is that they're going to start making the car payment, so it's a part of their budget, but that car payment is going as their gift and pledge to the campaign. And then when when they're ready for the car, they've already been making the car payment, so it's a part of their budget, and they can continue on with that. Other folks have been in a situation where they may not be able to give a gift right now. Maybe they've got a child or two in college, and guess what happens when your kid gets through with college? You get a pay raise. It's pretty nice sometimes. And oftentimes people say, well, I can make a pledge, but I can't give until year 2 or maybe year 3 of the campaign. That's fine. I mean, all of this has to do with what works for you. Sometimes it is, like I said, rechanneling a current expenditure and using what you would have used on something else on a monthly or weekly or an annual basis and giving it somewhere else. Sometimes there are gifts of, just keep on that one, Bruce. There are gifts of unexpected cash that sometimes happen. Some of you may have, over your lifetime, received an inheritance or a bonus or some unexpected thing that's happened. And, you know, those are just what they are called. They're gifts. And so sometimes a portion of those can be used as our gift. There's also gifts of real estate. Sometimes people have, in campaigns that I've helped direct, people have said, you know, we've had a couple of rental houses. We're kind of tired of being landlords. You know, it's probably time to sell and get out of that role. It's been, you know, some nice passive income. But one of the ways that we can help avoid capital gains that we're going to play if we sell that property is to give a portion of that sale as a gift to the church for the capital campaign. So that's how real estate, I mean, you can't necessarily give a piece of property to the church. The church won't own it. It's important for you to make arrangements to sell that property first. But there's a number of people that have bought, you know, a cabin by the river. It really was a good idea 20 years ago. And nothing ever really happened. You never got that cabin built. You never made the trips out there that you were going to. And so life insurance is another possibility. It's a very easy task for you to change the beneficiary in a life insurance policy. Now, we hope that will not be a part of this capital campaign in the next 3 years, obviously. But if you think about it, over the life of a congregation, even the saints that we honored on last All Saints' Day that have gone on, you're one of those saints, and someday that will be you that we're honoring in life past. But even a portion of a life insurance policy, you know, many of you have family members or whatever on that beneficiary. It's very easy to include 10% for the church. And, you know, simply call your kids and saying, well, guess what? You know, if I'm not here in a few years or whatever, you're going to be getting some of my life insurance policy, but so is the church. And so is the congregation that I love and that I've supported for years. Other types of gifts. Artwork. Now, I'm sure Nick would appreciate it, a beautiful piece of art in his office, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is art of any kind that, you know, maybe it is something that's been important to you, but you've moved, you've downsized, it's a different situation now. Sometimes a sale of that art can produce a sizable gift that then, if given to the church, you can use as a charitable deduction on your income tax. Precious stones, metals, rings. I told the story the last couple times we met in a mission rally. I worked with the congregation in Charleston, South Carolina, and a woman, very sad story. She'd been married 4 times, I think, and 4 husbands had died and preceded her in death. But she had diamonds from each of them, beautiful rings. And she'd been wearing all 4 of them, but as she came in to make an appointment with me, and she said, I've got other jewelry. These all represent wonderful pieces of my life, but I think in order to make a capital campaign contribution to this church that I love so much, I've been thinking about selling them. So what would I do? How do I go about that? And I said, well, simply, there's a jeweler here, a couple of them, have them appraised, which she did. And they were quite valuable, and she was able to give a sizable gift to the campaign. Now, the humorous portion of that is that a couple weeks later, when I came back to the congregation, the pastor said, well, you've really started something. I said, what? He said, well, the rumor is going around that our capital campaign consultant has told us that you have to sell your jewelry in order to support this capital campaign. So we had to quell that rumor and say, no, this was one instance that she chose to use that as an asset. And again, any kind of personal property. What I'm talking about is so many times over the years when I've done capital campaigns, I've had people come up to me and say, you know, we bought a beautiful RV 5 years ago, and we had all these plans for all these places we're going to go. It has about 3,000 miles on it after about 8 years, and we just haven't been able to use it like we wanted to use it. Maybe it's time that we sell that and use at least part of the proceeds for our gift to the campaign. And so this is just kind of to stir your thoughts a little bit about some possibilities. Other types of gifts, Bruce, the next slide. In your Mission Freedom packet that you received, and we've got extras over here if you need one, we have what I've called the ABCs of giving. And over the years that I've worked with congregations, people have come up to me and they've said, this is a part of what I've used in order to be able to fund the gift that I want to give to this church. So we got automobiles. There was a young man, in his mid to late 20s in Tucson, Arizona, a congregation I worked with, and his uncle had given him a restored Corvette, beautiful car. But he was in an apartment just starting a job. He already had a car. It's like, what am I going to do with this? He said, I know it's great, it's beautiful. So, and the congregation was having a capital campaign, and he had been a part of that congregation since he was small and really wanted to make a contribution, but didn't have that cash flow or any really assets except that one. So he went to the local, the management of the local mall and asked if he could display that Corvette and have a raffle, sell tickets to do a drawing to give the car away. And he raised over $25,000 selling tickets, and that was his gift to the campaign. And he was thrilled. I mean, a young guy being able to give a gift of that size, for him, it was a real joy. So there's all kinds of... Now, Pastor Nick asked about buffalo calves yesterday. He said, I don't have any of those. But working with a capital campaign in South Dakota outside of Brookings, there was a rancher farmer that was raising buffalo calves. And as he sold the yearlings, he said, I'm going to tithe the sale of these. And so, you know, a tenth of that herd went to the capital campaign, and it was a sizable gift. And I shared yesterday that I grew up on a farm in North Dakota and would haul lots of loads of grain to town, and every once in a while my dad said, tell the elevator operator that this load is going to the church. And that was the way that they, used the commodity that he had as the gift to the church. Next slide. So, just think through some of these things. I mean, some of these are a little obtuse, but not totally out of the realm of possibilities of things that you may have that, maybe it's a sale of it, or maybe it's time, to dispose of this particular appreciated asset. The next one, the last one here, silver, land, quartz, oil rights and royalties. There are some of those in Texas, I've heard. The next slide, the last one towards the bottom there, yacht, a yearly bonus, vacation homes. We actually did, I worked with a congregation in Houston where a member of the congregation had a yacht in Florida. He was working for Enron when Enron was Enron. It was fun time. It was actually making a lot of money. And I came into the office one morning, and the fax machine, I was getting my stuff ready, and there was a bill of sale that had just come out of the fax machine. And it was a sale of that yacht in Florida, which he gave the proceeds to the capital campaign, a sizable gift. So that's why that got up there. But you have your own ideas, and this is just to sort of stimulate your thinking a little bit. Next slide. Why give appreciated assets? Now, appreciated assets are like real estate or stocks and bonds. A couple of reasons: to avoid capital gains tax, as we've talked about before, and it can reduce the cost, so to speak, of the gift. So one of the questions I often get, if people have stocks, mutual funds that they want to share with the congregation, should I sell those and give the gift and write out a check to the church, or should I give the stocks outright to the church? And I think most of you are aware of that. The second option is really a much better option. If you go to the next slide, we'll show you. If a donor bought stock for, let's say, $10,000 years ago and chose the right one, and now the fair market value is $60,000, and the donor's in a 30% tax bracket and wants to give a gift to the church, this is what can happen. The fair market value, selling the stock, a tax advantage, of possibly up to $10,000, but the church still gets the full amount. And so it is a savings to you in directly giving. Now, you have to make sure your broker is giving that stock directly, transferring directly to the church, and just so that you're assured, when a congregation receives a gift of stock or mutual funds, it's sold immediately. So the congregation isn't going to hold on to that and try to say, oh yeah, what if in 6 months it goes up? Because it can also go the other way. So they just do that, they dispose of it right away. So you know that if you give that amount, that's the amount that's been given to the church, and that's part of the congregation's stewardship. Now, word about individual retirement accounts. Some of you may have an IRA that you've been contributing to for years. One of the nice things about the IRA is that it has been, it's tax advantaged up front as you make those contributions. But as it's continued to grow, and if you're nearing retirement, obviously you can take withdrawals from that retirement at any time. But when that comes out, you're paying income tax on it. It's like a withdrawal, and you have to report that on your income tax form. When you hit age 70 and a half, you have to take distributions from that IRA. It's called required minimum distributions. And you don't have a choice. They start coming out of that IRA and coming to you whether you wanted them or not, and they count as income. And so it's a possibility that as they come in, your income might go up as you've budgeted for your retirement. You may end up paying a little bit more for your Medicare and the taxation that comes with that. So one of the things that is really important is that, the next slide, if you start taking these, this is what I said, your overall tax rate might increase. It might increase the amount of Social Security income that's taxed, could increase the cost of Medicare premiums. So when that money starts coming in, you have to take a look at it and adjust things a little bit. Next slide, please. But you do have a choice. One of the great things that people have discovered in the last couple of years is that they can have those required minimum distributions given directly to the church. And if you do so, it does not count as income. So it's not a charitable deduction, but let's say $10,000 a year comes from your required minimum distribution. That comes in, but it lowers your income for that year. So in a sense, you are saving some as you're giving that as a gift. And the other thing that happens is a lot of times if people have retired and been retired for a while, you've adjusted your income in your budget, and then all of a sudden this is like a bonus. Because it comes in whether you want it to or not, and so it makes a really good option for a number of folks to use as a charitable gift. So next slide. So you can give up to an annual ceiling of $100,000. The distribution isn't taxable to the IRA owner or to the charity. It has to be sent directly from the custodian of the IRA to the charity, and it only applies to IRAs. Unfortunately, not the 401ks or 403bs and that kind of thing. All right? Next slide. So, again, it's probably the most tax-efficient way for retirees over 70 and a half to give to a charity and to make contributions as easily as sending a check or writing a check. So it's good to check with your broker or financial planner about this. The final slide is just remembering that it's got to be made directly to the church. Because if that comes to you first, you have to report that as income, and so that's additional taxing for you. Next slide, please. Next one, I think we did that one already. So then I'm just going to talk briefly about deferred giving. Basically, here's the inconvenient truth. That death is a part of life, we know that. That when we die, we'll take nothing with us, and that we'll die probably at a time that's not our choosing. So keeping that in mind, it's a reminder that we need to plan our stewardship for the time after our life on this earth as well as during. We often talk about stewardship of time, talent, and treasures, but this also includes how we plan for what comes next in our lives. And so, next slide. There's some objectives that can be reached through deferred giving. One might be a gift to the church endowment. And this congregation, for as young as it is, to have an endowment is terrific. Because as that grows over the years, there will be income from that endowment that can really make a difference for lots of ministries. We started one in the last congregation I served, and matter of fact, the first major contribution to that endowment was from a person who hadn't even joined the congregation yet. But he loved the congregation and he wanted to give something significant. And year after year, that congregation has been able to give away and start new ministries because of that. You can leave a legacy. There's tax benefits. There's an increase in lifetime income, and it creates a generous gift to your congregation. So how does this work? You can do a bequest from your will or your trust. Again, it's work with your financial planner. Many people have now included their congregation as a part of their will in the beneficiary, as a beneficiary. Life insurance, I've mentioned this before. Your IRA also needs a beneficiary designation, so you could include a portion of that for the congregation as well. And then there's tools of giving called trusts and annuities, remainder trusts and lead trusts, and we're going to talk about one of those, and that is the charitable gift annuity, just very quickly. So if you have, let's say, $25,000 in a savings account or a CD or some kind of investment, that's probably at this point in time you're only earning maybe, 1.5%, 2% at the very most out of that income. But you give that gift, if you have that gift turned into a gift annuity, and this can be facilitated by your financial planner, or the ELCA has an ELCA foundation. They have staff people that will do this for nothing. They put all of this gifting together for you, and that annuity then goes into effect, and after you die, the remainder of that annuity goes directly to the church. But here's where the advantage comes. Next slide. This is what Arthur did. He wanted to give a gift to his church. He was one of the faithful disciples of that congregation, wanted to do support for the future, and at the same time, increase his retirement income. So, he's 75 years old. He gave $10,000 to his congregation in exchange for a charitable gift annuity, and the ELCA Foundation facilitated that, and so at his age, the gift annuity rate is 5.8%. So rather than getting 1.5% to 2%, he was able to receive 5.8% on that $10,000 for the rest of his life, and even a portion of that is tax-free for several years. But the best part is that he was able to take the entire $10,000 gift as a deduction in the year that he gave it. That's the magic, if you will, of a charitable gift annuity. You're able to receive the tax deduction right now for income that will come to you for the rest of your life, and the remainder of which will go to the church upon your death. Next, please. And as a part of that, he had the joy of knowing that he was going to be able to give far more than he would have probably been able to give otherwise. So it's a gift that it's a way for him of keeping his congregation mission in motion, just as people like him had done for generations before. Some things to think about. This provides an irrevocable gift to your congregation through a transfer of assets, provides additional income. There's no capital gains on that money that you put into the tax annuity, and it's partially deductible for income taxes and avoiding the estate taxes that would have been paid on that at the end of your life. So charitable gift annuity rates, they vary. These may be not exactly the ones they are just today, but even at age 62, a charitable gift annuity produces 4.2% on that money that you put into the gift annuity. If you're in your late 70s or early 80s, it almost doubles, up to 8% in mid 80s and on. And then the next slide will show that if there are 2 lives on a gift annuity, joint and survivor, that the rates are still between 4.9% all the way up to 8.6%. I shared with the group yesterday that my uncle Clarence was a Norwegian bachelor farmer in North Dakota, and I didn't realize until after his death that he had 8 bank accounts with he was so afraid the banks were going to fail. He went through the 30s, and he was being very careful. But he had a favorite charitable, the Children's Home in Jamestown, North Dakota, and he'd given generously over the years to that. And I said, Clarence, you can take $25,000, $30,000 from one of those savings accounts and put it into a gift annuity. And at age 93, you would be getting 9.2% interest on that for the rest of your life. I said, that's just a nice bonus that you could give to your niece and nephews. Well, the first thing he said is that legal? And I said, yes, it's legal. This is part of what the law allows us to do with a gift annuity and create additional income. So we've got some additional handouts over here that explain this a little bit more. And if you want to talk with me or your financial advisor about this, this is not for everybody here, but it's important, I think, for all of us to think through how are we stewards of the assets that we've accumulated over a lifetime, and how will they be distributed so that the church and those things that we care about can be supported. Next. So how are we going to reach this giving goal? We've estimated that this congregation may be able to raise between $600,000 to $860,000 over 3 years. Remember that a capital campaign gift, many of you have been involved in the last 2 of them. It's a 3-year gift that's given, and as it's given, the interest begins to be paid because the principal is paid down. And in fact, as you give a gift, it's a bonus because each gift that's applied to the mortgage and to the principal reduces the amount of interest. So it actually is more than the dollar that you've given. It increases that gift. So in your appeal packet, in your campaign packet, there are several ways to give: through a check, through online giving, through a credit card, through gifts of stock. We've talked about those options. Next slide. There is a sample of the pledge card that you will receive on December 8th, and we're going to hand those out during worship, so you have a chance to fill those out and return them during the worship that day. But take time to look through that before you get here that day. On the giving potential, basically what this helps you do is to say, if I were to give a gift of $10,000 over the next 3 years, what would that look like per week? So it actually turns out to be $64 a week, or $277 a month, or about $3,000 a year. So you can think about, yeah, that's doable, I can make that happen. Or maybe, and I would invite each of you to take a look at where you think you might start your gift and start thinking about what gift you're going to give. Raise your sights up to the next level or 2. Might I be able to stretch, or through creative ways of giving, might I be able to get further towards the top of that giving potential chart, so that this congregation really can achieve what we're hoping for. Next gift. So, some things to think about. This is a promise for us. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. As we give our gifts, as we pray about it and receive God's wisdom through the Spirit, giving can bring some real joy. And joy isn't just about receiving. We give because God first gave, and I truly believe that God's abundance is contagious. It enables us to have a sense of joy about who we are and what we're able to support. Again, generosity enables us to be enriched in our life. It's a spiritual exercise that helps us to be freed and to experience the true joy. It builds courage, it builds faith, it builds trust in God that provides all, and brings love and joy and blessings in ways that really make a difference in our lives. So, questions about any of what we've talked about, either about the campaign itself or about some of the creative giving options that we've talked about? Any questions that you might have? I want to, yes, please.
I had a question
Yes, if you talk to Nick, Pastor Nick will have, the question was, if you have questions about how to structure like a gift annuity or some of these creative ways of giving, the ELC Foundation, Pastor Nick will have information, I've got information about that you can call and talk with them and set up a time to meet. They have regional responsibilities, so they'll be in this area at a time that you could set that up. So, yeah, there is assistance available through the ELCA. And now that Pastor Nick's on the board, he will know everything about weekly quizzes on all the things you're supposed to know about all of this. Any other questions? Yes, please.
To clarify something you said.
Yes.
As donations are being made during this 3-year campaign, those contributions will be immediately applied to pay down the mortgage.
Yes. Yes. So, well, say, yeah, Tim can clarify.
Yes, in the long run, that's what's going to happen. However, we need to have enough money set aside that over the next 3 years until this balloon payment comes due, be able to meet our financial obligations for the payment of the loan. So the first, whatever number, will be held in the capital account, and then anything over and above that number then will be immediately applied to our loan so that we can cut out the amount of interest. Hopefully, we can take off 30,000, 20,000, whatever we're going to be able to take off of the interest we have. But we have to be able to lock down at the very beginning to make sure that we have enough money to be able to pay our
Doesn't the balloon go down as you pay down the mortgage?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't the balloon go down as you pay off the mortgage?
The balloon goes down, but the payment does not. The payment stays the same. It's not refinanced every time.
Okay.
Finance stays the same, and then we add to it. So we're taking off on the back side, so we don't pay as much interest on the back side of this as on the front side. They don't renegotiate or they don't recalculate along each time that we make the extra payment.
Is that helpful? Need more conversation? Other questions? Yes, please.
We had a question about, do you have to be a member of the church to give? If you have a family member who doesn't have an organization to give, but they support you, could they give to the
So the question is, do you have to be a member to give? Absolutely not. I mean, if you, seriously, this is a time for those people who are in your family circle, if they don't have a church home and they know how much, let me tell you something. When I was developing Preston Meadow Lutheran Church as a mission congregation, and during our first 2 capital campaigns, my parents made substantial contributions because their kids and grandkids were going to benefit from that congregation. So please explore options. That's another creative way of receiving a gift for those who are emotionally connected with this congregation. So thank you for that question. Excellent. Anything else?
If you have questions come up, please feel free to contact me or Ray Morale at any time, and we're happy to sit down with you and talk through any of your questions. We have